Hi, welcome everyone. Thank you for tuning in. We are in week 3 of Save Your Photo Month. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Lisa Krigsman. I am the founder of Start Here with Lisa, and I am a certified photo manager with the Photo Managers. And I am so thrilled that you are taking time out of your day, either live now or later, watching this recording for Save Your Photos Month. So far this month, we've explored identifying important photos, digitizing them, organizing digital collections, uncovering family photo stories, and protecting printed photos from disasters. Today, we're focusing on photos that may have already been damaged and how to restore and recover them, a crucial skill for anyone who wants to rescue memories that might have otherwise been lost. If you haven't yet, I want to encourage you all to hit the subscribe button so you won't miss any more of our free sessions coming up this month. And I'm going to start with a prompt. Have you ever had photos damaged by water or fire or any other example like that, any other like crazy accident? So I'm going to leave you with this prompt to think about, and we're going to get started with the full-blown presentation in just a few seconds. Hi, welcome again to week 3 of Save Your Photos Month. One more time, my name is Lisa Krigsman, a certified photo manager and founder of Start Here. Have you ever worried that your precious family photos were destroyed and gone forever after a tragic accident like fire or just general water damage? If so, then this session is for you. We're really excited today to have Carrie Kane walk us through restoring damaged photos. Carrie Kane has always loved to organize anything for anyone, simply to share the joy that comes with tackling a project and making things look neat and accessible. She's equally as passionate about preserving photos and has enjoyed helping clients with their personal photo collections since 2019. In this session, Carrie is going to walk us through the technique for clearing, restoring, and recovering photos so that you can salvage your memories that might have otherwise been lost forever. You're going to learn actionable strategies to tackle damage and create a plan for protecting your collection moving forward. So this is, for those of you who are tuning in live today, this is going to be interactive. You're going to be able to type in your questions in the chat while you're watching Carrie, and she's going to have an opportunity to answer them after her presentation in the live Q&A session. So in the meantime, again, hit that subscribe button. And also, here's another prompt. Which photo in your collection do you have now that you would like to see restored? So those are the prompts. There was another prompt earlier that if you've had a photo damaged by fire or water, what is that? And so now to have us walk us through this restoration project, I'd like to introduce Carrie Kane.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. And thank you, Lisa, for the introduction. I'm Carrie Kane, a certified professional photo organizer and also member of the Photo Managers organization. Welcome to today's session of Save Your Photos Month, where we're going to talk about why damaged photos don't have to be lost forever. There is a handout that goes along with today's presentation, and you're welcome to scan the QR code that you see on the screen there, and you can download the handout now. One disclaimer, it's going to ask you for your email address in order to download, but that isn't signing you up for anything. Just by entering in your info, the download will be delivered via email, and then you'll have it there to refer back to later. So before we get into those restoration and recovery tips, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about me. My husband, Casey, and I have been married for over 20 years. We got married and welcomed 4 daughters in Wisconsin, which is where I was born and raised, before moving to Kingwood, Texas, which is just north of Houston. We moved here in 2016. My interest in helping others with their photos was born out of my own love for organization. I was the kid at sleepovers who was interested in like, hey, let's rearrange your bedroom and like clean out your closet. And also as I got older, a friend of mine saw my digital photos organized and asked like, who organizes photos that way? And so I guess not everyone stores their digital photos in chronological folder structures. Who knew? So in learning that this was a bit unique, I started thinking that maybe I could help other people get their photos organized. So I did some digging. And when I stumbled onto the photo managers, I thought this is definitely a group of people that I can relate to. So I became a member in 2019. And since then, I've helped clients from all over the country get a handle on all different kinds of photo projects. So I organize digital photos and physical photos, which includes scanning prints, negatives, and slides. And maybe my most favorite way to help clients is with media conversion, taking those old VHS tapes, camcorder tapes, and converting them to a digital format. So helping clients with their photos and memories certainly covers a wide array of topics. And that brings us to today's presentation about damaged photo recovery. So, we're going to talk all about what to do if you find yourself in a situation that leaves you with damaged photos. So now it doesn't matter if it's due to a natural disaster, a plumbing emergency within your home, or some other unfortunate event. None of us really want to spend much time thinking about the outcome of these situations. But when faced with any unplanned situation, especially this kind, which could potentially be dangerous and, as I've said, devastating, it can be made a little easier if there's a plan for how to move forward. So here are the things we're going to go over today. I'm going to give you some tips on what not to do, tools that you need to get started, as well as some health safety tips. We're going to talk about first steps to take after an emergency, and then we'll go over the process for cleaning the damaged photos as well as drying the photos after cleaning. Oh, and there was that QR code. If you wanted to scan that one more time, if you didn't get a chance on the first slide, you can grab it there. I'll just give you a second to look at that. All right, so I mentioned that my family and I moved to Texas in 2016. So, well, in all my time living in the Midwest, I never saw the type of destruction that we've seen since moving here. I laugh, but it seems like every major weather event is its own natural disaster. Our community has seen extreme damage from various hurricanes. Most recognizable is probably Hurricane Harvey, which was in 2017. We've had neighborhood flooding where my kids have been stuck at school where we weren't able to go get them, which that same incident led us to going to a school that we could get to, bringing students to our home to have them stay here because their family couldn't get to them. We've seen there's been wildfires recently nearby, and even burst pipes due to extended freezing temperatures. So we've seen firsthand families that have lost their homes and scrambled to save the things that matter most. And if you haven't personally experienced it, helping folks in those situations is very difficult, especially if your photos are important to you. So can you guess in a lot of those cases what those families prioritized? If you said family photos and albums, then you'd be right. Many people place family photos at or near the top of what they care about most, saving in an emergency, of course, after ensuring that their loved ones and pets are safe. The sentimental value that we place on photos is so strong in some cases, and the emotional attachment tends to give photos priority over other physical items and even legal documents that can typically be more easily replaced. So I hadn't yet joined the photo managers in 2017 when Hurricane Harvey devastated the Kingwood and greater Houston area. But in helping families clean up after the storm, I saw so many trying to save their waterlogged photos. I happened to find this quote that you see here on the screen from a resident of my town. And as photo managers, we hear this so often. Now, all that being said, I certainly, I don't want to trivialize the severity of these situations with the image here, but these events can truly be life-altering, because if your photos are damaged, it's likely and possible that your home has also suffered in some way. The combination of all of that can leave you feeling overwhelmed. So dealing with your photos might seem like the last thing you have time for while you're navigating an awful experience, like I've mentioned. But the reason that I want to share this information is because most of the time your photos can be saved by following a few key steps and addressing the damage quickly. So once the emergency is over, and maybe, just maybe, after you've taken a few deep breaths, you'll be eager to get started to prevent further damage. So I want to start with a list of what not to do. I encourage you, you're going to be staring at, your photos in any kind of yucky situation, and you're going to be frustrated and you're going to want to, try to make sense of everything. But I encourage you just to not throw anything away right away. They could be covered in mud or dirt, other chemicals that may be in the water. I just, kind of hang on to it until you have a chance to assess the entire situation. Do you want to know what's worse than wet and dirty photos? Well, that's dried and dirty photos. For best results, if you can't clean the photos right away, you want to keep them wet until you can get to them. So, and while you might find the photos, of course, we store them like in photo boxes or bins. Try to avoid creating more stacks as you're kind of gathering everything, because you risk losing all of them. They tend to dry like stuck in a brick together, which can be really tricky then to separate later. So if you do see them already stuck together, again, take some pause, be patient. Don't pry the photos apart. Any of these tips, any of these things that I'm saying what not to do, it's because you can actually end up causing more damage if you're not careful. And then that kind of leads us into the next thing. If you pick up a handful, the water has subsided, the surface of the photos is covered with whatever debris, your instinct is going to be to kind of wipe it away. And I'm going to encourage you not to do that. We're going to rinse them later. So wiping or rubbing the surfaces can actually create scratches, which then there's not really a way to fix that. And when we are rinsing, do not use any type of cleaning products. We want to stay away from soap, solvents, anything with chemicals and bleach. It kind of, things you might think it makes sense because they're covered in whoever knows what, but water is going to be your best solution. And then we might think like when you have wet photos that you want to dry them as quickly as possible. And that's actually the opposite of true. So we just are going to try to keep them wet as best we can. And then you don't want to use any type of exterior heat to speed up that drying process. So, you might want to reach for like a hair dryer, or I've heard stories of people like trying to bake them in their ovens. We don't want to do that. Even drying them in the sunlight can be damaging. We know that sunlight causes fading. So just stay away from all heat sources. And then lastly, once the photos have been touched by water, they have, depending on how the photos are made, the colors can bleed. And so we don't want to lay them on any surface that's going to be printed. You want to avoid newspaper. If you're going to put them on anything, newsprint, which is unprinted, or like just plain paper towel is going to be what you're looking for. So now that we've covered some things to avoid, we're going to talk about tools for restoration. So these are actually just some basic household items that you might already have on hand. Gloves and a mask. It's a good idea when handling photos to wear gloves all the time. And then now once they're covered in the flood water, whatever's in the water, we just want to make sure that you're protecting yourself by wearing gloves. And then a mask will protect you from mold, dirt, or other debris that you may encounter. You want to grab some plastic bins or resealable plastic bags, and we're going to use those possibly for storage and also for kind of creating these water baths that we're going to talk about. If you have glass, like baking dishes, that will also work just as well because they can be rinsed out. Clean water. we're not going to use any cleaners, as we talked about. So in most cases, it's going to be safe to rinse the dirt and debris off of your photos with cool or room temperature water. Tap water, of course, is going to be what's most readily available. Distilled water is a better choice if you have the option, but I can think about during Harvey, there are, and maybe in your case as well, it's not always just you that's affected. So if you have an entire community of people that are trying to tackle their flood damage and things, it may not be, you may not even have distilled water accessible if everybody's trying to run for it. So this list kind of just covers the things that you're gonna most easily have access to. And then, as you can imagine, wet photos will stick together very easily. So layering them with wax paper is a safe and efficient way to keep them separated. Unfortunately, some photos are going to be trickier to separate. So having a utility knife could come in handy, because you may actually end up, it might be safer to cut the photos from the albums and the plastic sleeves that they were stored in. You want to grab some trash bags. Inevitably, there's going to be trash. So, we hope that we're going to be able to save most of the photos, but it's possible that some of them are going to be beyond saving. And then at the very least, you're going to be pulling them out of like wet envelopes and, discarding the albums that we've taken the photos out of. So you want to have trash bags on hand to dispose of those items. And then lastly, unprinted newsprint, which you can actually get in rolls or sheets. But if that's not something that you have nearby, then you can also just use plain paper towel. So anything that like doesn't have a pattern, no like little flowers or anything, just white unprinted paper towel. This is not an exhaustive list by any means. Professional archivists will have many other tools that they use to preserve and restore family photos. But in an emergency, this list is generally things that you may already have on hand, and it'll get you going toward restoration in less time. So once the dust has settled or the water has subsided, we want to take a look at what things to do first. So it's a big project and there's a lot to do, but we want to focus kind of like where to start. So it's better to be safe than sorry. And I just can't stress enough the importance of wearing gloves and a mask during this process. Depending on your situation, the photos may have been exposed to sewage or other chemicals. And depending on how long it's been since the damage was done, your photos may also now be growing mold. Even if your photos are damaged by clean water, like you've had a pipe burst inside, mold can start growing in as little as 48 hours. So you absolutely want to be wearing a mask to protect yourself. And also it may be a good idea to wear some old clothes that you can discard when you're finished. So you might be thinking, okay, just in best case scenario, you had a pipe burst like in a closet or something over an area where your photos were stored, and you want to spread them all out on the dining room table. Well, we're not going to do that. This is not a project that you're going to want to tackle in your kitchen, inside the home. In some cases, you won't be able to even get back into the home. So we want to be working in a well-ventilated area. I'm in Texas, so we don't have basements, but some people do. And it's very common for there to be damage, done in basements where you've had flooding or things like that. The basement is not the answer either. So you're looking for something, possibly like a garage or somewhere that'll be outside. And due to health concerns, children and animals should be kept away. So now the order of these next few things is really going to depend on your situation. Like, how many photos you're trying to recover, how quickly you're able to tackle the damage, but they're all equally important. So I've said several times now that it sounds silly, but we want to keep the photos wet for as long as possible. Drying photos that have dried together or dried dirty are going to make the recovery so much more difficult. So keeping them wet until you can clean them is going to work in your favor. Best case scenario, you're going to have time to remove the individual photos from their wet envelopes right away. Start peeling the photos out of albums that they lived in. A helpful tip and something to remember, since you'll be in a hurry, is to take photos of the envelopes or albums. If there's information about the contents of the photos, that will be helpful later. So, for instance, you're peeling photos out of an album. Before you start, it may be helpful to take a photo of each of the album pages, just to kind of, if it's a layout that you want to reference later. it would be good to have. So, and then once we're pulling those photos out of their storage, you, depending on if you have time to, get started right away, or if you're not going to be able to get to it till later, you can actually keep them wet in sealed plastic bags, either in single layers, or we're going to layer the wax paper in between the photos. The caveat is that mold can start to grow within 48 hours. So the sealing in the plastic bags is a time-sensitive solution. A second way is you could actually soak the photos in a water bath of clean water until you can get to them. But leaving them this way too long can also cause more damage. So I know it really kind of sounds like, what are we doing here? There's, you could try this, but you could try this, but what if you just don't have any time? So then you can actually freeze the wet photos. Where if you're juggling too many other things and, the list is long, right? So you just don't have the time. You can layer the wet photos between wax paper, put them in those resealable plastic bags, and then stick them in the freezer. This is actually going to stop the growth of any mold. It's not going to kill the mold, but it'll stop it from continuing to grow. And then it's going to give you more time to get to your project. Of course, this also is requires electricity. So if you have to have access to a freezer in order to proceed that way. So you can see why the first steps are slightly interchangeable and are really kind of going to depend on your individual situation. It is worth noting that our goal here is progress over perfection. Okay. You are going to be overwhelmed. There's so many things happening all at once. Seeing your photos, in some cases, it's going to be the only copies that you have, or it might be everything you have. You're going to feel like all hope is lost, but try not to let your fear of losing the photos paralyze you. I promise that saving some is going to feel much better than saving none. And the only way that you'll save none is to just do nothing at all. As with any project, you're going to want to give priority to certain items. And again, this will also depend on how many photos you're working with, possibly like the subject of the photos and how much damage that the photos have sustained. Because, for instance, like framed photos are likely to stick to glass. So you're going to want to take special care and work on these as quickly as you can. If they're still wet, you may more easily be able to get the photo off, but the longer it stays in there, then once you start to peel, it could actually peel the image off of the photo. However, if you know that a framed photo is printed from a digital photo, you have family photos, that you had a professional photographer take, it's likely that you have copies of those. And so if you know that for sure, you can kind of just move those framed photos off to the side or possibly ignore them altogether. That is, of course, provided that you have a digital copy that's been preserved through the disaster. So this is slightly off topic, but so relevant. This is a good time to mention that is why we recommend having an offsite copy of your digital photos in case disaster strikes. You might be thinking like, well, I have all of these physical photos, but don't worry because they've all been scanned and digitized, or, I have all these digital photos. But if your home sustains damage, if there's a fire, again, a pipe burst, you lose a computer, well, it's possible now that you've lost that external hard drive that had all of your backups on it. So it's important to keep a copy offsite. So again, a little off topic, but feel free to ask a follow-up question as when we're finished with the presentation. And then next up would be like negatives or photos with no digital backup. So for instance, if you know that there are certain photos for which you only have one copy, that printed copy, like in the case of, older photos in albums or possibly school photos or wedding photos that, predate digital delivery, you may want to work on those first. I was married in 2005 and our photos were digital, but the photographer vanished into thin air. And I was actually never able to get digital copies of the photos. So thankfully I had been given prints. And so I have 4x6s of every photo that was taken, by our photographer that day. But that's a scenario. If that album gets damaged, if that was your only copy, you want to make sure you prioritize that album. So, and then also photos with the least amount of damage. So as you're assessing, you kind of just have to look at the whole project and, decide kind of which direction to move in. So if you have maybe there's an entire tub of photos that the water didn't touch, well, kind of peruse, what's in there, take a look at it. And if they're not damaged, or maybe there's only, some of the photos in that bin have been damaged, you can kind of move those off to the side and then proceed toward things that are, need some more attention. But, it can actually give you a sense of accomplishment if you're tackling, those photos with least damage. Having them in your, saved pile kind of keeps you motivated to keep moving. So, and then also if you have any heritage or heirloom prints, these are going to require, possibly a bit more care. And I welcome you to involve a professional for that. You can actually scan the QR code here, which will take you to the photo manager's website. You're able to enter a zip code or a city, and you can actually find a photo manager near you. Sometimes those older prints are made from different paper, or they just have a different finish that it's they'll have tips and helpful information on how to fix those. They have skills to tackle that. So, and this is actually, I want to pause and mention photo projects are a huge job. So especially this type of project, which again has the added layer of being so stressful due to your life possibly being completely upended. A top reason that clients reach out to us for help is because they're just overwhelmed and don't know where to start. So if you're unsure where to begin or how to proceed, go to the website, search for someone in your area, because we are here to help. And even if you just have questions, and if we can't help you, we can direct you to someone who can. So we are a resource, and you can feel free to search for somebody on the site that can help you and answer your questions. All right. So, man, this is a lot, right? It's a big job. So we are moving on to the cleaning process, and there's going to be an order for this too. So you're going to want to focus on wet photos first, always. Frozen photos next, if you did happen to freeze any. And then fingers crossed that you have those dry photos. So how many times have I mentioned now that you want to keep the photos wet? Frozen until you're ready to clean. If you haven't been able to get to it, and the wet was going to cause more harm than good. Once you're ready, then now you're ready. You've got your tools, and here we go. So I want to put this out there right away. Depending again on the size of this collection that you're trying to save, invite your friends and family to help. Many hands are going to make this process go so much faster, and you can actually then set up stations, which kind of have each person handle their own station. It's going to really speed things along. So then at each station, you'd actually be able to work on small batches at a time. If you're just getting to frozen photos, for instance, the same thing is going to apply. You want to remove those photos from their plastic bags and just thaw, a handful or two at once at room temperature. And especially in this case, if mold has already started growing on the photos before freezing, as soon as you thaw them out to clean, that mold is going to start to grow again, exponentially. So small batches is going to be your best bet to kind of clean and work through, what's been damaged. And I briefly touched on this, but it's a good idea to photograph any photos that are stuck to each other or stuck to the glass of, a frame or album pages before you attempt to remove or clean them. So, and then if you do have photos that are stuck, you can soak them in water. To remove framed photos from the glass, you're going to actually want to submerge the entire frame with the glass. And then again, don't separate the print from the glass if you've noticed that it's starting to pull off the image of the photo. If you're doing this, you can kind of clean them up the best that you can using the tips that I've mentioned, and then take those photos. So in the event that you're not able to save it, having that photo, is going to be better than nothing. And then in the case of photo albums, you would be surprised the sand and silt and dirt that can get into every crevice everywhere. So photos that are in albums, that dirt and that debris can actually get in between the pages and on top of the photos. And so you're going to want to be really careful removing photos from the albums, because pulling them out, then that debris and like sand can actually scratch the image, which then you're not going to be able to repair. So that's when you're going to want to grab that knife and possibly cut those prints out of the pages. So, and then just in all of the steps, we want to be working so carefully and being so patient. So like stacked photos, as I mentioned earlier, if you pick up a stack of them, it's like the image acts as glue. And now you just like have this brick of photos. So you're going to want to soak the entire stack in that cool or room temperature water, and it'll just kind of possibly, hopefully, start to loosen from each other. And then one at a time, you're going to gently, you can kind of see in the picture on the slide, you're just kind of peeling gently, not forcing them apart, to cause more damage to the photo. So, and then as you see in the picture, you're going to grab those tubs that we set aside. You can fill them with a little bit of water. And then you're actually going to want to work one photo at a time. So you'll put that in there and you're going to rinse it one at a time, kind of agitate it a little bit. And remember, no soap, no solvent, no chemicals of any kind, just water. And then avoid, trying to brush the debris off. Just kind of like agitate it in the water, swish it around a little bit, and then move on to the next photo. And then as a final rinse, the best option is going to be distilled water. But if you don't have access to that, then tap water will do fine. So you want to have 2 bins. You're going to do a 2-step rinse. So put it in the first bin, swish it around, move it to the next bin, swish it around. And as you can imagine, this water is going to get gross. So just be sure that you're cleaning, switching out the water and refreshing with clean as often as you need to. So at this point, are you exhausted just even thinking about taking this on? It's kind of like, just is the process ever ending? So, but we are getting close. So the next step is going to be drying your photos. So now that the photos are clean, you should really be feeling pretty proud of yourself. This is a big job and you are almost finished. So even equally as important as cleaning, now that we have cleaned them, we can move on to the drying process. And the faster they dry, the faster that growth of the mold stops. But again, we're not going to use any direct sunlight. We don't want to apply any exterior heat. We're just going to let them dry in the air in our well-ventilated area. You may find it useful to add a dehumidifier to the space to remove some of that moisture, just to kind of pull the moisture out of the air and help them dry as quickly as they can naturally. So, first, as soon as you take them out of the distilled water, you can kind of shake off the excess water, and then you want to lay the prints flat if possible, image side up, of course, on layers of either the clean newsprint, if you had access to that, or just unprinted paper towels. So, and then as you're watching, depending on how much water they soaked up, you can move them onto new, paper towels. If the towels are too wet, you can move them onto a dry surface. So, and then if you don't have enough room to spread them out in a single layer, you actually can string up a clothesline, again, in your well-ventilated area, not in your bathroom, not across the kitchen. Make sure you're staying in that safe area. And then you can hang the photos by just a corner with a plastic clip to dry. All right, so you've gone through all of that work, and I know that if they're spread out everywhere and again, you're kind of trying to get through this as fast as we can, but I urge you to be patient and wait to stack them until they are completely, absolutely dry. The last thing you want is to stack them together and then undo the work that you already did. So, and sadly, even if you can clean and separate, and dry the photos quickly enough to avoid too much extensive damage, they're probably going to curl as they dry, especially depending on the paper that they're printed on. You can correct this to some degree by stacking heavy books on top of them once they are completely dry. And at this point too, I would still add another layer of wax paper over the photos and then stack some heavy books, or you can, photos, wax paper, and put a stack of heavy books on top like that. And yeah, so, all right, you have learned what not to do we've talked about, we have the list now of like the simple household items that can be helpful during this recovery process. You learned what steps to take first after the emergency, how to prioritize the damaged photos for restoration, and you even have a step-by-step guide for cleaning and drying your photos. So if you did all of that work, then there is just one crucial step left to set yourself up for future success. And I urge you to scan your photos so that you will have digital copies. That way you'll be able to enjoy them for years to come. You can share them, with family and friends. And then if you should ever find yourself in that similar situation, you will have peace of mind knowing that you already saved your photos. And so thank you for watching. That is it. We did it. We got through that entire process, and hopefully you have a healthy pile of photos that are saved, and you can feel good knowing that you took the time and did all of that work. I hope that you found these tips and information helpful and feel better knowing that your damaged photos don't have to be lost forever. This session will be available for replay on the Photo Manager's YouTube channel, I think either later today or tomorrow. If you'd like to come back and revisit it in part or whole, you can see the Photo Manager's website there again, and a link to my website. And if you missed it earlier, there is that link again to get the free guide to walk you through the steps that we just covered. So thank you so much. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Carrie. That was so informative. And so before we get to questions, and we do have a few, I did want to promote the Memory Keepers Live Summit. So please mark your calendar. If you found this presentation helpful, please mark your calendar for Saturday, September 27th. We have a one-day virtual event that is perfect for anyone who wants to preserve, organize, and protect their photos and document collections. So some of our highlights, we have our keynote speaker is Matt Paxton from the hit show Hoarders. We're going to have hands-on workshops for printed and digital photos, as well as emergency preparedness. You're going to have some time to network with other like-minded photo preservation type people. There's going to be prizes and downloadable resources, and the sessions will be recorded. And this is super exciting and always touches my, community-oriented personality. 10% of the proceeds are going to be going to the Weather Resilience Fund, supporting disaster photo recovery. So for those of you who were like, every time Carrie showed something and you're like, oh, that's me because of, please know that there's a great resource out there. So my call to action to you is reserve your spot today for the Memory Keepers Live Summit on Saturday, September 27th. Registration link is pinned to the chat, and also you can scan that QR code. And so with that, we do have a few questions. Carrie, before we get to the public questions, I have a couple. You keep mentioning gloves, which are super, super important. Do you have a glove preference type?
I realized that I did not say. So latex or nitrile are equally fine. So you're going to want to use, those are a good bet.
And have a lot of those on hand.
Yeah. I mean, they come in like the box of like 200 or whatever, right? So yeah, I would grab a couple boxes for sure.
And then real fast, can you, I don't know if you touched on negatives.
Yes. Nope, that's the same. And actually, I didn't mention negatives, but just like when we're doing photo projects, like for our clients when they bring us their non-damaged photos, it is helpful to prioritize negatives. So for instance, if you have, you come across a bunch of them, like they actually, in my experience, can be saved even more easily than the photos. And they tend to, they're developed right in water, so all of this stuff. So so you want to prioritize those and do your best. If you have a set that is negatives and prints that match, then focus on the negatives.
Great, thank you. Okay, so now I think we'll see what public questions. Oh, here's a great one. How do you prevent photos from curling after water damage? And I know that you did touch on that, but I do think it bears repeating because that is a thing.
Yeah. So sadly, there's no way to really prevent them from curling. But as I mentioned, once the photos are completely dry, you're going to kind of let them do their thing. You can layer them between wax paper and then set the heavy books on them. There's a tendency that even after you do that, depending on what the photo is made from, that it might curl again. So I don't know if you've ever seen sometimes like really oversized photos, or sometimes people like curl things when they go to store it. We actually use like oh my gosh, what is it called? Like a humidifier chamber. Like you can actually just take like a Rubbermaid, like a storage tote, put a little bit of water in the bottom of it. And then you put a cookie sheet on top of it. Not a cookie sheet, like a drying rack, like a cookie drying rack. And then you set that print on top, so it's not touching the water. And then you close the lid, and that actually creates like a humidifying environment, and the print will like slowly uncurl. It is the coolest thing. So if you have like things that are super tricky and like actually really, really curled, or, you know, so delicate that you don't want to set the heavy books on top of it, you could also try that. So, but again, that process isn't touching the water. It's just, you know, the moisture being enclosed in that space is what's actually helping the photo uncurl.
That's great. And then, so on that note, I guess another question would be, when would you work on your own, and when is it best, do you think, to bring in a professional, either a photo manager or an archivist? Like, how much of this can be done by your average?
I mean, all of the things that I mentioned are you can do, unless of course, like, you know, if you have maybe health concerns of your own that you're like wanting to go nowhere near mold, like if you have asthma or you have, you know, certain other things that kind of come into play, or I don't know, you have bunches of children running around and this is like not something that you're ever going to have time for. I mean, that's why you can definitely contact a professional and just kind of see, and they might be able to guide you and say, if you do this, we can help with this. Or of course, just like every other project, you know, that we have, every other client, sometimes you just don't want to. And so that's okay too. And then you just, you know, give a call and say like, how do we handle this? And somebody surely we can either help you or find someone that can.
Fantastic. Okay. Can you use undo to prevent photos? To remove photos from glass or other pages?
So I haven't worked with this personally, but I actually feel like I just saw this. We have a photo manager's, like a colleague's page where we kind of, you know, share information and tips. So my understanding is that this is like, I think it comes in a tiny bottle. I think it's pricey, first of all. And I feel like maybe has mixed reviews. My recommendation would be to try the tips that we covered in the workshop first. And then if, you know, that's not working, then, I mean, what's the like worst case scenario here? Your photo's stuck to the glass. You can't get it off by using water, the tip that we recommended. So if you try the undo, you know, maybe that will give you more success. But either way, you know, it's stuck. So you might as well
like
try.
a last resort.
Yeah, take a photo of it through the glass, you know, clean the glass as best you can. Take that photo and then give it a try.
Yeah. Great. Okay, so someone says white cotton gloves are okay with non-damaged, I'm guessing, photos and negatives.
Yes, you can use cotton. We do that. The problem with the cotton is, even despite like what the description of the glove will say, sometimes those little fibers can get on your surfaces. So if you're just handling them, that's great. But if you're like wanting to scan, the nitrile or latex gloves are going to be best because they're not going to carry those little fibers that are going to, you'd be surprised if you're scanning photos, like those little fibers and things are going to show up when you're scanning. So, but yes, the cotton gloves are okay for just regular.
Also
photos.
with water, you wouldn't really want to be.
You know, that would be bad. That would be bad. Yeah.
All right, another question. Do you ever use dental floss or a spatula in your process?
Yes. And I didn't mention, we do. And actually, we do have like unscented dental floss. I have some here in my office. And then there's other like, you know, a variety of, actually, you know, it really works well. We said dental floss, but like dental tools, like those little spatulas and things, you can use those. I didn't recommend those in this damaged scenario because, like, we just want to be super careful. Again, if you've tried everything and, you know, it's not working, like, then you can introduce some of these other tools. But in the case of like the spatula in particular, if you're using like metal and your photos are soft because they've been, you know, absorbed water, then you actually risk like tearing through the photo. So with anything, just yeah, I mean, definitely gather all the tools you can, and those are things that we use in an undamaged situation. But if the tools that I mentioned aren't working, you can always give it a try.
Great. All right, another question, and I was thinking about this when we were talking earlier. If you can't get the photos to uncurl, do you suggest scanning the curled photos, and how do you suggest scanning them?
Yes. So if you are, yeah. So if you, I know it's kind of redundant, but if you can't get them to uncurl and it's something that you want to preserve, for moving forward, then, I mean, I suggest scanning all of them once they're restored. So that's a good option for that. And then that way, a lot of times, like I said, the mold is going to be a real issue. And so I didn't mention this, but if any of the photos have mold, even once you've preserved them enough to scan them, like, you're probably going to need to get rid of them anyway if they're covered in mold. So yeah, so you can do what you can to uncurl it, scan it, and then discard if it's not something that you need to keep.
Right. And so if you are scanning it yourself, having something like museum glass or acrylic.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. It's a two-part question.
Yeah. No, it's okay. So, right. You're making sure that.
Making sure you're protecting your equipment. Yeah. Wanting to do that too. And that way that you can clean that glass and make sure you're not transferring anything.
Yeah.
Particles. Yeah.
Yeah. And wiping it down in between.
Yes.
Photos. Yeah. Well, this was so informative, and I personally live in a fire risk area, and so hopefully I never have to use these skills, nor do I want to deal with a broken pipe. So I do also appreciate the focus less so on natural disasters that are extremely destructive, but those more mundane home things that a lot of us are probably going to encounter more so than something extremely tragic, because pipes do break and photos do unfortunately get in the way. So Carrie, thank you so much. This was a phenomenal topic to be informed about. And just again, I want to encourage everyone here today to subscribe to the Photo Managers. We have a lot more still to come this coming Thursday on September 19th. Just kind of on the coattails of what Carrie was talking about, we're going to have David Erickson here, Rebuilding Your Photo Collection After Disaster, How to Recover Lost or Damaged Photos. So very much on point. So again, thank you. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, sign up for the Memory Keepers Summit, and keep coming back. Questions are going to be asked probably throughout the month as people are watching the recording. So Carrie will be popping in other photo managers as well to answer it. And so with that, thank you so much, Carrie. And for everyone who tuned in live and asked questions, and for those of you who are watching this recording, please know that you can still ask questions and someone eventually will pop in and answer them for you.
Yes, thank you.